Let's start with an idea that sounds simple, but sits right at the heart of development economics. There is a difference between a country that grows and a country that truly develops. Hold on to that distinction. Over the next few minutes, we'll follow three countries and three very different fates. I want to open with a number that, on paper, looks like a miracle. Somewhere in the world, there is a country whose income per person grew by about 25% a year. And not for a year or two, but year after year, for almost 2 decades. 25% compounding. At that pace, an economy doesn't simply grow. It transforms. You would expect poverty to fall away and lives to change completely. And yet, in that same country, over those same years, half of its children were not in school and its people were still dying young. So here's the question I want you to carry with you. How can a country become so much richer while the lives of the people inside it barely move? Keep it in your pocket. We will come back to it, too. Economics can feel abstract, so let me make it personal. Think about your own family. The growth of the last century quietly rewrote your grandparents' lives, and then your parents', and then yours. In the food on the table, the medicine within reach, the kind of work you're able to do. But, and this is the point, it did not happen the same way everywhere. A child born 60 years ago in Malaysia, a child born in Ethiopia, and a child born in Ukraine all began in more or less the same place. Poor. 6 decades later, their countries had drifted so far apart they are almost hard to compare. Understanding why, that is the whole of this chapter. So let's meet them. Malaysia in Southeast Asia, independent since 1957. Ethiopia in Africa, never truly colonized, freed from occupation in the early 1940s. And Ukraine in Eastern Europe, independent only since 1991, when the Soviet Union came apart. 3 regions, 3 very different histories, but roughly a common starting line. What we want to understand is what happened on the journey. To compare them honestly, we don't lean on a single number. We look at 6. First, gross national income per capita, the income a country's residents earn, at home and from abroad, converted to US dollars and divided by the population. Second, the infant mortality rate, the number of infants who die before their first birthday per 1,000 live births. Third, life expectancy at birth, how long a newborn could expect to live if the conditions at its birth held for a lifetime. Fourth, adult literacy, the share of people 15 and older who can read and write a simple statement about their everyday life. Fifth, how much of the economy is still agriculture. And sixth, how much the country trades with the rest of the world. Income, health, learning, and the shape of work. Together, they tell us not just how rich a country is, but how developed. Now let's put our 3 countries against those signals and watch them move over 60 years. Start with income. In the early 1960s, all 3 were poor. Malaysia around $250 a person, Ethiopia just $80. 6 decades on, Malaysia has climbed past 12,000, Ukraine to about 5,500, Ethiopia to just over 1,000. Everyone rose. But look how far apart they finished. Health tells a similar story. Life expectancy climbed for all of them. And Ethiopia's rise is the most striking of all, from about 40 years to 68. Malaysia reaches 77, Ukraine 75. And infant mortality fell steeply. Ethiopia came down from nearly 143 deaths for every 1,000 births to 34. Malaysia and Ukraine down into single digits. That is real human progress, and it deserves to be named as such. Now look past the totals to the shape of each economy, because that is where development really shows. In 1960, agriculture was nearly half of Malaysia's economy, about 44%. Today, it is around 8. Ethiopia has come down too, from over 50% to about a third. But a third is still a great deal, and trade moved in different directions. Malaysia opened up. Its exports rose from about half of the economy to more than 70%. Ukraine and Ethiopia drifted the other way. One country wove itself into the world economy, the others less so. So what pushes economies onto such different paths? The forces come from two directions. Some are internal, a change in the political system, shifts in population, disease, natural disasters. Others come from outside, global trade, the movement of capital across borders, new technology, and globalization itself. And it is rarely one cause. Usually it is several, tangled together over decades, which gives us a simple way to name what happened. Malaysia, growth and development. Foreign investment came in, manufacturing took off, and ordinary lives were transformed. Ethiopia, stagnation. Fewer changes, an economy still rooted in farming. And Ukraine, transition. Not simply growth or its absence, but a wholesale change from one economic system to another after 1991. Growth, stagnation, transition, three fates. Now, we economists do like to sort the world's countries, and over the years we've used a great many labels. You'll hear First World and Third World, North and South, developed, developing, and least developed. You'll also hear emerging economies, and industrialized versus post-industrialized. Each of these captures something real, but they are loose, and they can carry judgments we don't always intend. So the World Bank uses something sharper, a ladder of 4 rungs set purely by income per person, low income, lower middle, upper middle, and high. And here's a fair question. Why should a bank be the one drawing these lines? Because a bank lends. Ranking countries by income is really a way of judging who can afford to repay, so that poorer countries can be offered better terms, lower rates, and longer to pay them back. The classification isn't just a label, it is tied to real money. Place our 3 on that ladder, and it clicks into place. Ethiopia sits on the low-income rung. Ukraine and Malaysia are both upper middle. And these rankings do move. Just this year, 6 economies climbed a rung, and one of them was the Philippines, crossing into upper middle income for the first time in nearly 4 decades. Which brings us to the idea at the center of everything. It is tempting to treat growth and development as the same word. They are not. Growth is a rise in income. The economy produces more, and the average person earns more. Development is bigger and deeper. Improvements in health, in education, in human welfare, and a change in the very shape of the economy as work shifts from the farm to the factory to the office. A country can have one without the other. And what decides whether growth becomes development is very often this: how the income is distributed, whether the new wealth is shared or pools in a very few hands. Which is exactly the puzzle we opened with. That country whose income grew 25% a year, it was Equatorial Guinea, and the engine was oil. For a time, the numbers pushed it into the high-income bracket, on paper, in the same company as a country like Hungary. But look at the lives behind the number. In Equatorial Guinea, people lived far shorter lives, and far fewer of their children were in school than in Hungary. The money rose. The lives did not. That is what growth without development looks like. The economist Simon Kuznets described modern economic growth as the application of science to the problems of economic production. It built the world we know: industry, cities, longer lives, more choices. It is powerful, and it is good. But keep the caution that comes with it. Development is more than a bigger number. So the next time you hear that an economy is booming, ask the second question. Booming for whom? Watch the lives, watch the shape of the economy. That is where development truly lives. That is our first look at the patterns of development. Thank you for spending this time with me. If it helped things click into place, do subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.